Welcome back to Inside Politics. My guest today is Pat Nolan. No, not me. It's a cousin of mine. It's Pat Nolan, who's the director of the Center for Criminal Justice Reform. Pat, you talked a lot about how you go to conservatives and get them to understand the things that need to be done to reform the criminal justice system. Democrats have heard your arguments before. How do you convince them that you're not one of them, and vice versa? I mean, how do you bring people together when they're like, wait a minute, do we really have common ground here? It sounds like you're finding some people that do find that common ground.
Yes. One of the things that Chuck Holtz and I worked hardest on was to try to get conservative leaders to speak out on the need for reform, not to accept the status quo that's failing us. And so people like Newt Gingrich, former Governor Jeb Bush, Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform, David Keene, the former president of the NRA, they've all spoken out in support of these reforms. So that helps conservative legislators to say, look, I see what you're saying. I see the current system is failing and it's bankrupting our state. If anybody attacks them for being soft, they can say, do you think Newt Gingrich or Ed Meese are soft on crime? We have 4 former Republican state attorneys general that are solid supporters. You know, do you think they have gone soft on crime? No. What we're trying to do is make the system so it makes the public safer and at the same time costs us less. Texas has shown we can do it. Tough on crime Texas.
I think you're having some success in the states. You hope to have some success here in Tennessee. But everything in Washington is so politicized and polarized, it would seem to be a lot harder up there. Is that why you're concentrating more on the states? Because
yes.
Congress and Washington is just kind of beyond the pale to be able to make that kind of bipartisan hook?
We are trying, and in fact, in the Senate and the House, there's strong leadership for this, but so far it hasn't moved. You're right, the states are where the real action is, but frankly, that's the way the founders of the Republic imagined it.
The states are the laboratories for the things that need to be done.
And so, you know, for instance, I mentioned Texas. They've changed their policy so they reserve expensive prison beds for truly dangerous people, have taken half of the savings and put it into treatment programs in the community. Addiction treatment, mental health services, job skills training, but also to supervise them well. It's not let them free, but it's without the expense of paying room and board and taking them away from their families.
Is that the kind of legislation you're going to try to get passed
Correct.
here in Tennessee? And
Right.
you feel like you have some support from this from the governor?
Well, on the juvenile justice,
part,
we definitely have it. We're working on building the support on the adults. Let me just say one thing. In Texas, they've been able to close 8 prisons. They've saved over $3 billion, and the crime rate is the lowest it's been since 1967. So we've shown we can intelligently limit the prison population by only locking up the truly dangerous and still make the public safe and save money.
You do have some ties in Washington. You've been to the White House several times under the Trump administration. You have a relationship with the president's son-in-law that actually predates the White House. How do you approach? I know you'd love to have some support for President Trump. On the same hand, that sort of automatically, if he's for something, there's a lot of people in the country automatically going to be against it. So how do you work that? And again, you're working with another person who's a White House aide. Both of them wind up in these conversations about the investigations. You must have to walk a pretty fine line and path on that.
Yeah, it's Washington is, you know, somebody when I was young said politics ain't beanbag, and it's certainly true. But Jared Kushner, whom, like you say, I met only through God's hand 10 years before. If you'd asked me or probably him if Donald Trump would be president, we would have laughed. But we share the interest in criminal justice reform together, and really. Number one, states have balanced budgets. They have to have by law. Unfortunately, federally, we don't. So it hasn't forced legislators to confront the cost of incarceration. But secondly, legislators are afraid of being tweeted about that they're soft on crime. And what we're really looking for is the president just to say, I support reform of the system. You know, he doesn't have to say specifically what to do, but tell the legislators they're not going to be picked on.
Very briefly, there's going to be a governor's race in Tennessee next year. This is the last year for Governor Haslam and for a number of lawmakers. Are you doing outreach to candidates, particularly on the gubernatorial level, so they understand these issues? Because there's a pretty good chance this may be a multi-year effort that you're talking about.
And in fact, my experience is it will be a multi-year effort. And you're absolutely right. Part of our priority is to educate people running for office, because if they talk about it in that campaign, it's much easier to do it when they're in office.
And you're also doing very quickly outreach to churches. That's why you're here right now. You're trying to reach out to, because you think the churches have a major role to play in this.
Absolutely. They've been the backbone of many of the reform efforts through history and in criminal justice. And it's through the churches that have traditional values, but also a moral sense that we have to have dignity even for people that have broken the law.
Pat Nolan, Cousin Pat, thank you for coming on the show.
God bless you.
Good luck with you on that issue, and we'll probably have you back again. I know you'll be back in town over the next couple of months, including for the 100th anniversary of the Dutchman's Bend train wreck, which is coming up next July.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics this week. Hope you'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.